reached the bottom of the hour at 10:30, and I know everyone's time is very valuable. And as the year here for the academic year is coming to a close, a lot of planning here for the upcoming years. Welcome to the webinar series here at Corwin, Key Issues and Budget for Local Education Agencies. Peter Birdsall is here today along with Jessica and John Hannigan. And next slide. I'm Aaron Heinzman. I'm the Corwin Senior Professional Learning Advisor here in California. My contact information, aaron.heinzman@corwin.com, along with my phone numbers on this slide. And you'll receive a copy of this slide deck here as well for joining us today. It would also be on Corwin's website and YouTube channel as well. Okay, a few Zoom keeping reminders before we get going. Please open the chat box, submit your questions. We will answer questions at the end of the webinar. Also, the webinar is being recorded. And again, it says there you will receive your certificate of attendance. Will be sent via email in a few days. Also, we've had a couple of times we've had this happen, but info@k12.corwin.com is included in your inbox, so you'll receive emails from Corwin. Upcoming webinars, as we finish up this academic year, there's on May 23rd, Doug Fisher, Nancy Fry, and Diane Lapp will have a webinar on teaching reading. And you can also go to corwin.com/webinars to register for this and additional webinars as they become populated available on the Corwin website. Okay, here actually, make sure I'm on the right slide myself here. Key issues and budget for local education agencies. Peter Birdsall, he's the executive director. Next slide. Actually, hold on. I want to actually introduce Peter. So Peter Birdsall is the executive director of the Professional Learning Coalition and former executive director of CSESA, the California County Superintendent Education Services Association. His experience in state education policy includes serving as a legislative advocate for numerous California school districts, county offices, and professional associations. Peter, what is it? This is the time you take over.
Happy to. Thank you. Yep. Well, thank you for everybody joining us. The focus of my comments today will be on the governor's May revision and sort of what's going to happen next month and what that means for LEAs. So it is going to be, there is no perfect time for this presentation until the budget's been finalized. So but meanwhile, we know you're all trying to finish up the school year and plan for the coming school year. So I hopefully the timing is good to give you a heads up on some issues. If you have questions, because some of the topics we just want to have a chance to go into great detail, or want to know what happened, you have my email here. So please feel free to email me with those questions or follow-up information. As Aaron mentioned, I'm executive director of the Professional Learning Coalition, which is a coalition of school districts and county offices around the state that really think it's important for the state to focus on supporting professional learning and instructional materials and technology. Would you advance the slide, please? So the primary focus of my comments today is the governor's May revision, which came out last Friday, the 13th. To put it in context, it's important to briefly review what happens next. So now the Assembly and Senate are reviewing the budget. They will take action by Memorial Day weekend, so by the weekend after this weekend. So what that really means is Wednesday or Thursday of next week. So we are very close to having meaningful information about how they're responding to what the governor proposed. It's a little bit oversimplified, but basically you can imagine negotiations pretty simply as a three-party negotiation. You have the Assembly version, the Senate version, and the governor's version. What we know today is the governor's version, and I'll do my best to predict for you what the Assembly and Senate are likely to do. Between June 1st and June 15th, those three parties will work to reach a compromise. In years past, some of these budget negotiations have gone on forever. Now this is, as you know, a very democratically controlled legislature and governor, so there's great pressure on them to meet these deadlines. These are constitutional deadlines because the message is sort of, well, why can't you do it if you're all in the same party? So we are fully expecting they will reach a compromise by June 15th. At that point, the budget goes to the governor, and he has until July 1 to sign it. And so it's by July 1. The governor usually takes right up until that deadline. So by July 1, we'll actually know the facts, have language, have dollar amounts, et cetera. So we're sort of at the very beginning of a 6-week sprint to have final answers on the budget. Move the slide ahead, please. So there are several items where I think you can plan confidently at the local level. And so that's what the first couple slides, several slides will focus on. So you can plan on, there's going to be full funding for the 6.56% COLA. COLA is the cost of living adjustment. So that's already in statute. There's no debate about it. So you will be getting that funding. The thing that's unusual is there plus additional base fund. And I chose to be that vague just because it's going to be a lot. This is obviously you're all working through the issues of declining enrollment, attendance issues, and COVID and ending the school year, and all the related issues and the staffing shortages. So in that context, though, I do have to say this is a good news presentation. Hopefully you'll leave it happy because there's going to be a lot of money. And this is ongoing funding. This is through the local control funding formula. It'll be 6.56% plus. So the governor has proposed an additional $2.1 billion. So that's a 3.3% additional increase. So that gets you up close to 10%. And both the Assembly and Senate, again, they haven't taken action, but as you've gotten messages from their leadership, they are both talking about higher numbers. The Senate's talking about additional $5 billion, which would be another 7%. So you're looking at, literally potentially a 10 to 15% increase in LCFF funding for school districts and charter schools. Whole separate issue on county funding, but there's a proposal for additional county funding too, County Office of Education. So that I'm assuming for most of you will be part of the collective bargaining process. But and that obviously depends a lot on what the number is, but it's going to be an increasing number. You can plan on that. Can move forward on the slide. I think one of the main things I want to highlight this morning is there are, beyond the general purpose collective bargaining money, there's 3 significant funding streams that are definitely coming your way. There's going to be a large discretionary block grant. The governor has proposed an $8 billion discretionary block grant. As Aaron, when he introduced me, pointed out, I've been doing this for a long time. I'm still trying to get used to a number like $8 billion. That's a lot of money. That translates to about $1,400 per student. And this is in addition to the funding you got last year, in addition to the funding from the federal government, et cetera. So that's the governor's proposal. The Senate was actually talking about $15 billion. So, whatever it is, it's going to be large. There is an interaction here, and this is not intended to be a school finance workshop, but there's an important interaction between the ongoing funding, the prior slide, so what goes into LCFF is ongoing money, and what is available as a one-time discretionary block grant. In general, the governor wants to put more of it into the one-time money because that protects the state down the road. The Assembly, like Assembly O'Donnell, who's the chair of the Assembly Education Committee, yesterday was saying he wanted to put as much as possible into the ongoing funding so school districts can build into their ongoing programs. So there is sort of a balancing act here where the more money that gets put into the COLA, the LCFF formula, that'll drive down the discretionary block grant because they're taking money out of that and saying it's really ongoing, building an ongoing base. So that, in school finance parlance, that's going to be probably the biggest single issue in budget for K-12 education, which is how much is one time and how much is ongoing. Having said that, whatever the answer is, it's going to be a lot of one-time money, and that is something we want to focus on later, because that is, I think, a real challenge for school districts. How do you effectively use a really significant increase in runtime money on top of all the one-time money you've already received? The other two that are clearly going to happen, the governor is fully funding the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program. The legislature supports that. And the governor is fully funding the planned expansion of transitional kindergarten, and the legislature is going to support that. So if you go to the next slide, please. So for the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program, this is one that I hopefully most of you are fairly familiar with. It's been a hot topic now for like a year and a half in statute. This is for grades TK through grade 6. Districts are required to offer a 9-hour day, which would consist of the regular school day plus before school and after school programs, plus 30 what they call 30 non-school days. So those could be intercession, summer school, etc. And districts need to start implementing this in 23-24. So you'll get funded in 22-23, but you have a fair amount of flexibility this year as you ramp these programs up, which obviously is really important given all the staffing issues out there. The important news in the May revision is the governor has now fully funded it. In the May revision, he added money, so it's $4.4 billion in ongoing money to school districts to provide these services. And for local planning, the most helpful thing is he now has specified what the rate is. Before, you didn't really know how much you're going to get. So districts can now have an actual number to work off of. And the figure is $2,500 per unduplicated student. So an unduplicated student, I think you all know this, but just to be clear, low-income student, English learner, or foster youth. And they use the word unduplicated because you don't count a student 3 times. It's not, you just count them once. So the math now becomes pretty easy for a district to figure out how they're going to do this. So I obviously going to use nice simple numbers, but if you had 1,000 students in TK through grade 6 in your district, you then multiply that times $2,500. So that's $2.5 million. And then if half of your students are unduplicated, 50%, then you multiply that 2.5 million times 50%, and you'd have 1.25 million. So your CBOs can do that calculation really easily, and now you can start planning a program. You have a real dollar number to work with. This is going to be approved by the governor and by the legislature, so hopefully you're well down the road planning it. Now we just have more specificity on how it works. I saw the chat. Is there amount for students who are not unduplicated? No, there is not. The requirement is, as proposed by the governor, is if your district is 75% or more unduplicated students, you have to offer this program to all of your students in grades TK through 6. If it's less, your district has less than 75% duplicated, then you just have to offer this 9-hour program to all of your unduplicated students. And then you saw the funding rate. Can we move to the next slide, please? So transitional kindergarten, the legislature for some time now, and the governor has had a plan to expand over time TK access so that all 4-year-olds can be in the program. That will continue. Sorry, I see the chats. Aaron, I guess we'll come back to those later. I'll try and answer them as I can. But the TK program is being expanded as planned. The new information in the May revision is there was a provision in last year's budget that if there was funding, the average class size in TK would be 24-1. And the governor has now said there is funding in the budget to do that, and the rate is $2,813. So your district will get the regular funding for the ADA, and then an additional $2,813 per TK enrollment to be able to add staff to those classrooms to get the class size down to 24-1. The additional staff does not have to be certificated staff, but it does obviously change the adult-student ratio. So hopefully, again, somebody's been planning for that for a while, but now you have the exact numbers to work with to put that in place, and that will go forward. So if we can move the slide again. So then the May revision is in addition, this isn't always the case, but this year, because the money is there's so much money, is in addition to what the governor proposed in January. So in January, the governor proposed 1.5 billion for career technical education grants, 500 million for dual enrollment grants, 500 million for reading specialists, 300 million for multilingual school and classroom libraries, and roughly $1 billion for arts and music in the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program. All of these are one-time funding proposals. So all of those are still in the budget. I'm just going to run through these really quickly because I want to make sure we leave time for John and Jessica to share some ideas, and also so we have time for questions. The CT dual enrollment grants, I think those were both new programs. There's a lot of legislative resistance to creating yet another categorical program. So I think the funding or some kind of initiative in that area is going to be approved, but the legislature wants to consolidate them in some manner with the existing CT programs. I don't know if they'll get that done by this budget, but they'll get it done this year. So my advice would be, well, I guess there are a couple of things. If you care a lot about that, then you should send me an email, get involved in the advocacy around those issues. If you're not involved, want to be an advocate on it, then just sort of heads up that something's coming probably July or by August on those programs. The two I want to highlight a little bit more are the reading specialist literacy coaches, because the governor did provide a lot more detail on that in the May revision. It is now proposed to be a grant program, so it's not a competitive grant program. So I think it goes through the way it's proposed this way. So you can expect the money. It goes to schools that are in the highest 10% in the state in terms of their percentage of unduplicated students. So if you feel like a number of your schools are in that category, you can expect this money. If that's not your situation, then you have a couple minutes break while I talk about it. Those schools would get 100, well, the dollar level will depend on the level of participation, but it's at least $150,000 per year for 3 years to hire reading specialists or literacy coaches and to provide mentoring and support to put literacy programs in those schools. So basically, short story, grant money to highly impacted schools, impacted meaning high percentage of unduplicated students, to support literacy programs. And then the multilingual school class library program also would now be a grant program targeted to its 85% unduplicated students and at least 15% EL. So there's no opposition to programs like this. The only challenge in the legislature is the sense of we're bringing back categoricals, and maybe we should just put it all in discretionary block grant. So, but I think the governor obviously or the governor's staff puts so much effort into recrafting these proposals. Suggests to me they really want to see this go through. So I think if you're interested, we can send you the language. We're thinking about it. Obviously, by July 1st, we'll know if they're funded. And it's a pretty significant focus on literacy at the elementary grade level. The $1 billion for Expanded Learning Opportunities Program, I continue to think that one's really severely at risk. So I would not plan on it. And if you're an advocate, you probably want to jump in. And the reason for that is that school districts are going to get $4.4 billion in the governor's budget for the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program without actually having to offer the program this year. So I think the view of the legislature is if those districts want to use that money to build the infrastructure in arts and music, they're going to have the money to do it. That's part of the preparation. And then let's roll that money into discretionary block grant. So those are all sort of observations or predictions, whatever you want to call it, about those elements of the budget. Can we move forward, please? And one more slide. So the new proposals in the governor's budget are $300 million for the educator effectiveness block grant with a priority for, so the educator effectiveness block grant, all the districts in the state received their share of $1.5 billion last year. So hopefully you're familiar with it. You had to develop a plan for how you can use those funds by December 31st of 2021. So it'd be allocated the same mechanism. It'd be additional $300 million. So rough numbers, you can just figure out how much you got last year, and then take 20% of that, and that would be the new allocation. It says with a priority for STEM, so science, math, computer science, but it actually would be local control. So it's a good candidate for discretionary block grant, but it also may be approved. Either way, we'll know by July 1st on that. The community schools, the governor has, in last year's budget, the governor legislature put up $3 billion for community schools. The governor's out proposing another 1.5. Same category. Hopefully it's of interest to you. You can watch it. Or if you're an advocate, you really jump in. But there is so much money already in this system that what they're trying to do is, while there's money available, put money in the pipeline for several years down the road. But there's enough money already at the state level to fund everybody that applies. So I think operationally it has very little effect on you. It's more what's the long-term commitment to community schools. And clearly under this governor, there's a real strong commitment to the community school movement. And then there's $100 million proposed for a community engagement initiative. This is to involve parents, staff, and communities more actively in the development and implementation of the LCAP. So community engagement is generally viewed in the legislature as a good thing, so I wouldn't be surprised if that's approved. And then that'd be competitive grants. So I don't think any of those really rise to a level of you should shift your planning. My recommendation is your planning should be focused on, to whatever extent you're involved in negotiations around your ongoing funding, around the implementation of Expanded Learning Opportunity Program, around the implementation of expansion of TK, and then the one-time money. And so I really wanted to end my comments with that transition. I think recognize that most of you are probably mostly planning on ending the school year and getting some rest this summer. You also, I think it's a worthwhile conversation to start thinking about how do you most effectively use this expected enormous influx of one-time money. You've been through it enough already that one-time money is one-time money, but you can use it for several years. So it probably will say it's available to you through 2025 or 2026. You'll have several years of this one-time money. The state, the conventional wisdom, which of course could be wrong, but the conventional wisdom right now is people are very nervous about the state's budget situation. We're very reliant on the stock market. Obviously, that is being hit really hard. A lot of concerns about a recession. So, it's probably not reasonable to expect we're going to continue with this every year. The budget is bigger than we've ever had it before, and there's always more money. So it is now to start shifting, thinking a little bit about this money is potentially going to go away over time. How do you build it most effectively into your school programs to support students? So it's with that in mind, I'm really glad that we have John and Jessica Hannigan with us today. They are really well known and active in the areas of social emotional learning and restorative practices. They have a best-selling book, Don't Suspend Me, and I understand their second edition just came out. And so congratulations on that. I wanted to ask them if that's okay. So for school districts that are suddenly going to be receiving, literally billions of dollars, say $1,200 to $2,000 per ADA in one-time funding, what advice would you give to them as to how they strike that balance of trying to have something sustainable that at the same time really addresses the needs that we all know are out there in terms of not only learning challenges, but the social, emotional well-being and health of children. So I know there are a bunch of questions while they're speaking. I'll look at those, and Aaron and I will come back to us later on the budget. But right now, I'd like to turn over to John and Jessica, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you for having us.
Man, I can't wait till my first quarter school site council meeting, huh? Can I get an amen on that, everyone? Oh man, that is a windfall of money, and what a blessing for our schools and districts across this state to be able to have this level of support when needed. And so as a principal during that 08, 09, when that financial crunch and the housing crisis, when we were asked to do much more with much less, this is the complete opposite of that. And so with that, exactly, it brings some profound challenges. And when we work with districts and superintendents, they're like, I've got so much money, I don't even know what to do with it. that we have a lot of money and we have to spend it in a certain amount of time. So it's good that we have that multi-year plan in terms of that we do have, 2025, 26 to be able to spend this. So as far as my advice, and then I'll turn it over to Jess, would be to be exactly that. Have that. What is our long-term plan for implementation and sustainability? Avoid those seductive detours or the need for that quick fix that we see this with our students. So we need to rush out and purchase this or do that. That what we need to do is build out that long-term sustainability implementation. So be wary of those quick fixes. Also be wary of those false prophets. There's people that may have been fixing cell phones in the mall last week that are now saying they're an SEL expert. So when there's money in finances like this, you're going to see experts popping up everywhere. So do some careful vetting of the experts out there that are going to help you build out this system. So again, long-term, meaning we're building out that sustainability. You're building a system. So what will this look like at the end of the 22-23 school year? What are the measurable criteria of success? If I hire an SEL coach, what would be those indicators of success for that position? I've hired this person to help solve this problem on our campus. What would be those long-term ramifications of that? Because once this money goes away, what would then really happen with this position? And so this also can't be seen as a shift of responsibility onto something or someone else. If we just hire this SEL coach, that will fix this problem. It takes that collective responsibility away from us as a school campus invested in the learning for every student on our campus. And now we say it'll be that person's job to fix it. And so building that system that as we have that long-term implementation, professional learning that's supported with targeted coaching to build a system for sustainability.
Nice. And just to piggyback on what John is talking about, I always go back to my why. What is our why? What is the mission, vision, goals of our district? What is it that we are trying to accomplish here? Unfortunately, there's too many times, even in the past, we work with districts that get some funding, they hire more people, they try to add layers of supports, but yet there's no system in place, there's no focus, there's no accountability. So they keep adding more people. We call it the everything school or district, but we don't know if it's working or not. And so that's exactly the opposite of our model when we're working with districts and schools. To be honest, it's not our favorite to come out and do like a one shot, here you go. I mean, we do it and it's fine. But what is the most impactful is when we're seeing a change in the data in those schools, in the districts, where we're actually changing the narrative. So my recommendation, I know there's a lot to think about here, is going back to your why. What are those district-wide outcomes? Taking a good look at what's working and what's not, and really deciding how are we going to match up the work that we're doing, actually have an accountability plan, and roll this out across multiple stakeholders so that it's actually effective. That would be, my key recommendation as you're starting to think about this, this funding.
And don't do it alone. Use a guiding coalition. Seek input from all the stakeholders so that you're making informed decisions based on the needs of everyone within your system. And so just like Jess said, working with districts that have said, okay, each site has an SEL counselor or each district coach to provide for these certain schools. But then when we look at then, so what are those clearly defined roles and responsibilities from each? That's where it gets a little muddy. And now they've had a year of implementation with this additional person, and there's no success criteria to see what is the impact that I've made within this role. So just that careful consideration that, especially if we're going to invest in human capital, people, what will this look like in 2025? And so take an inventory of what you currently have, leveraging the resources that we currently have at our disposal, and then to be able to see now what would the addition of this person look like. So Jess said, start with your why. I like to say, starting with what would be like managing my list of regrets that I don't want to have. I like working backwards. What's the worst possible thing that can happen? So start managing your list of regrets. We had this at our disposal and we squandered it. So look at what would be those regrets that I don't want to have. Put those preventive measures in place.
But again, it ultimately comes down to our students. What do our students need? What are the inequities in our districts and schools? We have a lot of them in California and throughout the nation. And how are we going to invest to truly change that narrative? That really should be how we are spending this money. And to be honest, if you're doing that and you're starting to show evidence and data points showing the change in the narrative, then you're going to be able to build your case to sustain certain supports in the future with whatever level it is that you have to show that evidence for. Also, I wanted to note one more thing. Building capacity within your own leadership is also, your educators and leadership is also important. As you're thinking about training and supports, how are we, building and sustaining capacity in the work that you're committing to? And again, stay away from the everything district. Stay focused on what are those three or four main buckets we are working towards with our data points, and how is what we're doing helping meet those, those goals for our students.
Another red flag would be this reminds me of when Common Core, when we switched from the 97 standards to Common Core, that the need was, our teachers need professional development. We're going to do close reading. We're going to do this, that. We need a new curriculum. So we need to train our teachers on curriculum. And then you go and talk to teachers and they're like, I'm drowning. You're killing me. And so thinking in that, because they're like, just let me get good at one thing. Avoid the temptation to try to fix everything. So focus on what would be that high leverage. This is what the outcome we're seeking for, the measurable criteria for success. We're going to implement and we're going to do this very well. The need to then say, okay, SEL, okay, teachers, we just bought this curriculum. We're going to be, the SEL police are going to be going through your lesson plan book to make sure that you've got a block of time every Friday, 30 minutes that we're doing SEL, and teachers are just feeling like, we've got gaps in learning. Now we're creating an additional block of time. I don't have the training or resources. So just be wary that our teachers are obviously stretched very thin as well. So having an overabundance of professional learning could also be very paralyzing to them as well. So what are we going to focus on and do it very well?
And I want to just give an example. And you could put it in the chat here if you're noticing this in your district or schools. But there's been an increase in behavior and social emotional needs across the nation. In the chat, yes or no, are you noticing that in your districts? This need was already present prior to the pandemic. Yeah, it was already present. We already had disproportionality in school discipline nationwide for specifically students of color, students with learning disabilities. We already had a need in mental health. We already had teachers saying, they're feeling burnt out and they're struggling. They didn't go to school to learn to be a therapist, etc. I mean, get it out. This is what we were hearing even prior to the pandemic, and it's just expanded. So how do you address those types of needs with this type of funding and make it really work? So I'm going to give you an example of 2 different districts we work with, and we love them both dearly, and we're not going to say names. But one district, calls, Jess, John, we have a problem with suspensions and everyone's frustrated. We need a 3-hour don't suspend me training. Okay. So how are we going to go to the deeper levels of educating your board, educating your district office, educating the communities and families around what true other means of corrections are, having the stakeholder conversation with students, parents, teachers, educating them in their role in what other means of correction is, and in the admin role in what other means of correction is. So our second district did the opposite. You know what? We're gonna really think about this in multiple layers. So as we're working with you, Jess and John, it's not just going to be a one-time, here's our motivational speech of why, we have to do this. No, we're going to go deeper than that. We have district level board training. Then we have admin training and coaching support. Then we're going in and working with the teachers and staff, the families and students. And together, we're really, truly implementing something that's going to shift our culture, shift the way we do business. And on top of that, we have district-wide SMART goals aligned with this work that we're doing. So we're not just doing this as compliance. We're doing this because, number one, it's the best thing to do for our kids, but we can't do it alone. We all need to be on the same page as much as we can. So that's just like a little difference of professional development, kind of like a quick drive-by PD, and then a true professional learning opportunity embedded with coaching, a sustaining model with goals and outcomes, so that even when we're gone, this is just the culture of the district.
And even when the money's gone, it continues and sustains.
So I know we've given you a lot to think about, and that was just one area. We support schools in systematic tiers of supports aligned with PBIS, restorative practices, social emotional learning, and really it comes down to the why. The why of this work. Our kids and families need this more than ever, and we need to be focused. We need to look in the mirror. We need to see what's working or not. This is not an ego thing. This is our data, both quantitative and qualitative, our perception data will tell us what it is that we need at our district to change this narrative. And there is hope. We have seen districts prior to the pandemic, in the middle of the pandemic, after or ongoing pandemic, making an impact. And so can you. So we'll open it up for questions, comments, anything you need from us, but hopefully you stay connected. That's our email as well. And of course, Erin is here if you ever are interested in ongoing professional learning with us. We would love to support you.
Thank you, Jessica and John. And again, Jessica and John's emails are right there as well. So if there's any other questions beyond our webinar right here, or for Peter too, you'll be getting a link for this webinar as well, so you can reference that. We have some questions here, kind of circling back here to the one of the first questions, did you say that the expanded learning opportunity requirement would not be enforced in the 2023 school year?
Obviously, since I'm humming and hawing, the answer is not obvious. The governor's May revision says basically imposes no requirements until 23-24. So the governor's proposal is $4.4 billion, and then these requirements kick into place effective a year from July. There are some legislators that are skeptical about that. I don't think there's any momentum to require districts to actually implement it in 22-23, because people are cognizant of just the exhaustion and the staff shortages and how complex this is. I think there might be some discussion of if you don't implement it in 22, 23, then the funding gets cut back a little bit. But I also, so that discussion has happened in the legislature, so I should acknowledge that. Having said that, I don't think they're going to do that, in part just because there's so much money. It's, you know, it's just like not an issue. Plus, the legislature is so preoccupied with other issues. You know, we all live and breathe education and children. If you're in the legislature, they're talking about water and fires and gas prices. So I think the likely outcome is that the governor's proposal prevails, and what the governor proposal is you get full funding this year, but the requirements in terms of audits and all that kind of stuff that you're actually providing these services to all students would not kick into gear until 23, 24. So that's a long, somewhat complicated answer, but yes, that is what I said. It would be 23, 24.
Thanks. Actually, Leanna, thank you for the nice, you love Peter's sense of humor. Yeah, he definitely makes me smile as well with his humor. So I just thrown that one in there. Will the reading specialist literacy coaches grant, is this a competitive grant that LEAs need to apply for?
And before I answer that, I want to cycle back to the TK thing, because I put a response in there. The question was correct. I mean, TK does have an adult student ratio requirement of 12:1. But they also, the May revision includes a class size average requirement by school side of 24:1. And then it provides an additional funding, and we now have the dollar amount of $2,813 per ADA to fund those staffing requirements. So clearly districts have a huge staffing challenge going in TK. So the reading specialists, this one, when in January, when the governor comes out with his budget, there's what's called the trailer bill that actually implements all these proposals. When you look at the May revision, some of the programs get little tweaks, but there's not, not something really dramatic. The literacy coaches reading specialist program was just substantially rewritten. So what that tells me is, or says to me, is that that's really a serious effort by the governor's administration. You're putting a lot of thought into it. They've worked with a lot of people. So that's why I sort of gave it extra, highlighted a little bit extra in my comments, because it seems like this is something that the education advisors of the governor really think is important and put a lot of time into it. One of the things they did, which I think is really encouraging, is not a competitive grant program now. In January, it proposed this competitive grant. Now it'd be just a straight out grant program. If your schools are eligible, then you would get the funding. It's, as I said earlier, they say it's to be eligible, you have to be in the top 10%, if that's what you want to call it, the highest 10% in terms of percentage of unduplicated students. So the department would have to make those calculations, then they'll know how many schools and students there are, ask people if they want money. I assume most people will, and then they'll allocate it. So the dollar amounts could vary a little bit, but the statute does say that it's at least $150,000 per year for 3 years. So if you have schools that you believe are that impacted, I think you can, assuming that this is approved by the legislature, when the budget is finalized July 1, then you can plan on that money coming. Hope that wasn't too convoluted an answer, that was clear, but it's the best I can do when these things are still in process.
Thank you, Peter. Armando, you mentioned you came in late. Is it possible to get a recording of the webinar? Yes, you will be sent a link for that, so you'll be able to have that. Leanna?
Yeah, there's a question there. I'm sorry, I just saw in the chat, Aaron.
Yep.
Technically, that's right. For Expand Learning Opportunity, the program is in place for this year, the requirements in place, but there is no audit. So for me, that means it's not really in place. That means, and I know lots of people are looking at it that way. So just to clarify a little bit. So the law says that you are to offer this program to all your unduplicated students. And if under a certain threshold, you have to offer it to all your grades, if you're heavily impacted district, to all your students in TK through 6. My advice to districts is, as you're ready to do it, I would start doing it as soon as you can. But nobody's going to audit you to say, did you in fact offer it to everybody? Because school districts, with the staffing issues, and some districts I know are contracting with boys and girls clubs or other after-school community providers. So as you put those things in place, you obviously don't want to start next July trying to put those in place. So they'll sort of gear up, would be my expectation this year. But there is nobody's going to be auditing you to make sure that you did that in order to get all the funding. I don't know if I'm making it worse or better, Aaron, but that's the.
No. Well, yeah, thank you everybody for the questions. Again, you have Peter's email address along with Jessica and John. So if there's other questions that may arise after our webinar here today, please reach out to them or myself. We will be happy to support answering those and kind of maybe potentially brainstorm what those some of those things could be in the future here. So next slide, please. Oh, there's a couple upcoming Corwin Institutes. There's actually a brand new one added just for Jessica and John here on September 26th that this slide does not share. So you can go to Corwin's website /institutes. You can see where Jessica and John's institute, they'll be able to expand more on the work that they do on September 26th. Next slide. Okay, I guess this is my slide. For me, if you want to have a conversation with me about what professional development could look like with some of this funding, or bring Jessica or John on a call so we can kind of brainstorm. I know John used the word like working backwards. We can look at some of our goals and develop a plan to work backwards for your district or school site. So please reach out. There's my contact information as well, and you'll be able to, when you get the webinar, you'll be able to have that number as well. So. I think it's the last slide. Jessica and John's books. Their brand new book, like Peter mentioned at the beginning, Don't Suspend Me, is this coming out. It's the 2nd edition. It's a great book. Building behavior, SEL from a distance. Jessica and John, they're my go-to here with all the Don't Suspend Me work, the PBIS work, the SEL work through California. We've had a lot of long-term clients that we've worked with over the years here throughout California. So. And if anybody would like maybe a preview copy of one of those books to get your hands on that, to kind of dig into what some of the content could look like as they could potentially come out and work with your school site or district, please just reach out to me by email or a phone call, and I will be happy to connect you with a copy of the book. So, there's a 30% discount also if you're looking at getting all staff, a 30% discount and free shipping. There's the code right there from the top right corner of that slide. So thank you everybody again for coming today and spending your valuable time. I know the academic year is coming to a close and a lot of racing around trying to close loops and get prepped up for the summer, and then also planning here for 20 and 22. So thank you. And again, thank you for your time, and we look forward to the next time we're able to connect with you.
Bye everyone. Great information, Peter. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, everyone. Happy end of the school year.
Thanks.
Bye.